And Jill, we can make that available to anybody then who would like to watch.
Great, thanks.
Katie Main.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you on here. Sorry, I forgot to last minute to send that to you. I apologize.
That's quite all right. I had time free.
Good. Jill, I don't know if you remember, Katie Main is with Congressman Boss' office. So I'm very excited she could join us.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We'll give it a couple more minutes. And then Jill, whenever you're ready to kick it off, and then I'll do the intros before we have the speakers if you'd like.
That'd be great. I just wanted to thank our Illinois Agri-Women President, Deb Schultz, for coming on today. And she just was going to start out, she has to attend another meeting, but she just wanted to welcome everyone. So I guess it's 12 o'clock, we could turn it over to Deb.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you guys joining us for this Southern Illinois, excuse me, virtual webinar. And we're looking forward to the speakers today. Jill has worked with Susan and set up a great program for today. So thank you, Susan, for all your help. And Jill will have some more information about Illinois Agri-Women at the end. And we have a great website for you guys to check out. And we're always looking for new membership. So I'll let you go ahead, Susan, and do the intros. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for a few moments, Deb. We appreciate your support. And Jill, thank you for allowing us and working with us to be able to serve as host for this. We were just talking that I hope that post-COVID we're able to keep some of this going because it's an easy way to connect people and keep women in agriculture who are always very busy connected. So I want to thank all of our speakers who agreed to help me today and help Illinois Agri-Women. You each have amazing stories to tell, which all of you joining us also have great stories to tell. I also want to thank Dean Ishman for joining us today for his support of this program, and he is always willing to do whatever we need to support Illinois agriculture. So Dean Ishman, thank you for joining. And with that, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of our speakers. We have Lexi Mueller, who is our future Saluki and the current Illinois FFA president. We also have Taylor Harkey, who is a current student, and Taylor has a long list of accomplishments behind her name as well. So, and I'll save that for her if she wants to share them. We had Casey Boyle, who is an alum, and Casey and I, she's a 2012 graduate, if I have that correct, Casey. But Casey and I have been connected through the years. Farm Progress Show booths, we've been able to hang out a little bit and connect and catch up through the years at various ag activities. And I was very excited recently. She's launched a Facebook group called Corn Belt Cadence, and I'll let her share that, and hopefully you will all join her in that after this to network women together in agriculture. And so she's got a great story. She's done some great virtual activities of networking. I attended one. I hope to attend more. That was very good to remind us on how to network, even virtually. And then we have Dr. Karla Gage, who is our Weed Science Assistant Professor. I'm very excited to have you. She's doing a lot of research in various areas, including in hemp, which I know was an interest to this group. So with that, I'm going to fade into the background, turn it over to Lexi and let you do some personal introduction and share your remarks. Each speaker will then transition to each other. And we will have questions at the end if you want to share them in the chat or even ask them once the speakers have all presented. And again, thank you for joining. And I'm going to fade in the background. I'll disappear here in a little bit, but I hope you enjoy the day. Thank you for your support, and go dogs. All right, Lexi.
Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, as Susan said, my name is Lexi Miller, and I'm currently serving as the Illinois FFA State President. So I'll start off by providing a little bit of a background on myself, so it's not just a random stranger talking to all of you. So I am from Valmeyer, which is a little bitty village outside of St. Louis in southern Illinois, but on the Illinois side. And I was born and raised on a grain and livestock farm. So me and my 3 other siblings, along with my parents, raised all kinds of livestock, probably way too many to count, but some of those include sheep, goats, chickens, pigs, horses, rabbits, you name it, we raised it. My family also raised wheat, soybeans, corn, rye, and alfalfa. And I graduated from Valmeyer High School as a valedictorian in May of 2020. And then while I was in high school, FFA was probably my biggest area of interest besides soccer, but I attended every single conference, every competition, leadership training school, whatever it was, I was probably there. Some of those competitions ranged a little bit from everywhere to everywhere. I participated in public speaking, livestock judging, parliamentary procedure, and even ag mechanics, which I know little to nothing about. So some different learning experiences. But while in FFA, I also had 2 SAEs. So if anyone is familiar with FFA, SAEs are supervised agricultural experiences. And if any of us have any agricultural products or projects or things that we do that are agricultural related, we keep records on those, whether they're just journaling notes or maybe finances. And then you can compete with them and also earn degrees. So I had 2 of them in FFA. My first one was sheep production entrepreneurship, where I raised Tunis and Hampshire sheep. My second one was specialty crop production, which I raised pumpkins, gourds, and Indian corn, squash, everything you can imagine in that aspect too. So Halloween, one of my absolute favorite seasons. But FFA also showed me some leadership positions like the one that I'm in now. But my senior year of high school, I was elected the Section 22 president. So Illinois FFA divides Illinois into 25 sections. So the whole state is divided into little bitty boxes and one person represents each of those. So then on a state officer team, we have 25 section presidents and 5 major state officers. So I represented Section 22, which had 20 schools and about 900 agriculture students. And after my year serving as my section president, I decided to run for major state office and was elected in June of 2020 and will serve until June of 2021. So that's a little bit about me, but I wondered what on earth I could speak about today that would relate to all of you. So I thought maybe I'll just provide a little bit of background on Illinois FFA. Women were allowed into FFA in 1969. So that was about a little over 52 years ago. And today there's over 20,600 FFA members in the state of Illinois, and 42% of those FFA members are female members. So in just over 50 years, about 8,600 female students are in FFA compared to the 0 that were involved in FFA in 1968. So that's a pretty big jump in 50 years. We've overcome a lot of obstacles. And there have been 2 all-female officer teams elected in Illinois. And the first team, we have 2 members actually on the call right now, but was the 2018-2019 team, where Miss Taylor Harkey served as the treasurer and Miss Shaylee Clinton served as the reporter. And then the second year was the 2020-2021, which is a team that I serve on right now. And I know one of my teammates is on right now, and that's Miss Emma Kuntz, who is serving as our treasurer from Altamont this year. She did a little virtual clap for us, so I appreciate that. But the unique thing about our 2 teams, and I think it's really interesting that there are at least 4 of us from the past two all-female teams. And the unique thing is that we weren't elected because we were all female. We were elected because we were the leaders that Illinois FFA wanted to represent their organization. And that shows you the steps and the progress that agricultural education has taken in our state. And then I figured I'd go on to kind of talk about what our team has done this year. So Emma and I's team, we were elected in the midst of a pandemic, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic. So our year has not been normal, and we have not seen a year or any activities that have been not COVID-19 related. So in the beginning of the year, we've been in it for about 9 months so far. Seems like a long time, but it feels like I was elected yesterday. In the past 9 months, we provided a lot of virtual content, and some of those include different virtual speeches, some different virtual conferences. We've also met with a lot of different chapters virtually through our virtual meet and greets. And then we also created and hosted an entire virtual conference for first and second year members called Ground Zero. And that conference spanned over 2 weeks. So we had one conference 1 week, that was our week 1, and then we had our second week, so second session. And in those 2 weeks, we reached about 600 FFA members, first and second year FFA members from across the state, which was a big accomplishment, especially because I'm sure all of us are a little tired of virtual conferences, and I can tell maybe by a couple of the faces that I can see that that's probably a little bit true. So to reach 600 members in 2 weeks is a big accomplishment for our team. But in the past month or so, we've seen some eased restrictions, and we've been able to actually get out and attend in-person Green Hand workshops. So Green Hands are our first year FFA members. And then also some new chapter charter signings. So chapters that are saying, we want to be a charter, we want to be a chapter, this is our first year. We've attended 2 of those so far, one of them including the very first ever homeschooled FFA chapter in Illinois, and that's called Home Fires in Georgetown. So that's been really, really exciting. That was one of our about 6 this year. So we've had some new charters. But while some schools are able to have in-person invitations and in-person interactions, some schools are still virtual, and all of the experiences that we are giving the schools that we can go to in person, we're still providing virtual options for those schools as well to be inclusive. So I hope that's kind of explained a little bit maybe about what we're doing, and we've been able to do all these things, adjust to our situations and overcome these different obstacles because of the leaders that have come in the past. So just like Taylor and Shaylee's team taught us how to handle the public eye of being an all-female team, other leaders have taught us how to overcome those obstacles and have taught us the leadership that we need to have in order to be strong agriculturalists. And this past year, I have learned how to be a successful and dedicated person in agriculture. And it's because of the leaders like all of you on this call right now, and then also some of the leaders that we're going to hear from later on. They'll share their stories and you'll understand why they were speakers. And I'm glad that I got to start so I didn't have to follow the amazing stories of any of the other speakers with us today. But if there's any questions or comments, anything that I can ever help you with, I am greatly devoted to pushing forward the agriculture for women and youth. So if there's anything I can do, I'd love to hear it, but I look forward to hearing from the rest of you ladies today. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Miss Taylor Harkey.
Thank you very much, Lexi, and wonderful job. Now I have to follow you. Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Harkey, and I'm a junior studying agriculture systems and education, specializing in agricultural communications and minoring in agribusiness economics. So I am currently a student, and honestly, my start for agriculture didn't just happen when I decided to major. Rather, it was a gradual progression of a lot of different events. I was blessed to be raised on my family's diversified grain and livestock farm, similar to Lexi, where we raise swine as well as dairy steers, as well as grow corn, soybeans, and wheat, and had a lot of different hobby animals through 4-H and FFA. So the rabbits, chickens, geese, goats, you name it, it was probably located on our farm at one point or another. But those experiences really kind of started to create a passion for the industry. And I really credit that start to being raised and just kind of thrown into it at such a young age. But I will say there was a time where I was trying to take a step back from being a part of agriculture. In fact, when I sat down at the kitchen table the summer before my freshman year, I had my schedule all ready to go, all lined out, organized. If you know me, that's kind of how I handle things. All I needed was a signature. And my mom was like, I'm not signing it, like your dad has to sign it. And I was like, okay, cool. I was always taught that determination, perseverance will get you through just about everything. It didn't quite get me through the conversation I had to have with him though, because as you saw on my schedule, my elective was not agriculture. It was rather art. And he was not a fan of this change or this decision of mine. So after some long conversations, I had to change that art elective to Intro to Ag. And as much as I still give them a hard time and I say, you know, I have so much determination and it just doesn't get me far enough with you, it still kind of set me on that path to continue my involvement in agriculture. As much as I was involved at a young age, whether it was helping vaccinate piglets, or one summer that was my entire job, was to just take care of them every day, not to mention the loads or bringing meals to them in the field. I just didn't think that that was where I should fit. And growing up in that environment and being surrounded, I'm actually a quadruplet with 3 brothers. So their passion always was going to be production agriculture. And when I was around it, yes, I enjoyed it. Yes, I enjoyed being around it and I loved the industry, but it just wasn't the same for me as it was for them. So actually, when I turned 16, my dad said, all of you have to have a job, regardless of where it is. If it's on the farm, it's on the farm. If it's not, that's okay too. So at 16, I actually got employed at my local movie theater because it worked around my schedule, whether that was between FFA events or athletics. It worked really well. And I started to actually create and develop kind of a recognition of how much I did love ag. While I worked there, I enjoyed communicating amongst customers as well as with those who I worked with. And a lot of those instances were actually when my coworkers would ask me about agriculture or ask me why I was needing to ask off for X, Y, or Z FFA event, or when I was wearing like a soft shell casual FFA jacket and a customer would straight up ask, what does that emblem mean? What is that you're a part of? And it really kind of opened my eyes to, although my passion wasn't in being a part of the industry, maybe there's still a place for me in communicating about it and about that personal experience that I've been so very blessed to have. So I continued working at the movie theater, and honestly, I still do even to this day, occasionally when I come home. After a year of employment, I actually was promoted to being a general manager there, and that created some challenges. I was looking and overseeing individuals which were older than me, who had been there longer than I had. Not to mention, I was now looked at to, if there's a power outage, if any projector problems occur, I'm your go-to. And as intimidating as that can be, was instilled through, being in agriculture that it's okay, take the challenge on and find a solution and you can do it. And throughout that experience, I really learned that regardless of where I went, agriculture would always be there. And rather than taking a back seat, it was time to take a step up and be a part of that. So that allowed me to start pursuing a career in agricultural communications. And I'm so blessed that I had those realizations. But I think when I look back, part of those hesitations I had in being a part of the industry, like I mentioned, was not having that same passion for production agriculture as my siblings did. As much as I enjoyed it, if you know them, they are incredibly enthralled. That's mechanics, crops, livestock, they've all got it covered. And truthfully, being the 6th generation, I'm so very thankful that they're there to take over the farm and to have that role so it can continue. But as women in ag, it's really easy to think that we need to go against the grain. As a woman, you need to be in the production side of things because that's not what typically is done. But there's a lot of value in going towards the grain. Whatever that skill is that you have, it's finding that value wherever you fit. And I think it took having some of those experiences outside of ag for me to really realize that going towards the grain and having those experiences is great and can bring so much value to the industry on different levels. This past summer, I served as a consumer engagement intern for Illinois Farm Bureau, where I really started to see what future I could have. Working in their Center of Agricultural Engagement, virtual of course, but doing so, creating resources and starting to communicate with consumers really instilled in me where I can go. And having that idea of service in agriculture is driven by service. The idea of farmers serving the world by creating their safe and sustainable food supply. My way of service is not creating that sustainable food supply, but rather it's working with and serving the farm, the farmer, and the consumer from all 3 different aspects. So it really took kind of taking a different mindset to find a role, but I'm so very thankful that I did. And it's a role in which I encourage not just other people to go into, but it's a mindset of having and being ready for growth, being able to challenge your perspective. I like to say there's no comfort in the growth zone and there's no growth in the comfort zone. You have to establish those opportunities where you feel uncomfortable in order to continue excelling and finding whatever you're trying to get to, or whatever challenge you're trying to overcome, or the person that you want to be. And throughout various experiences, I've been able to grow. Whether that was last week competing in the National Collegiate Discussion Beat for American Farm Bureau, where I think when I say I was raised in production agriculture, everybody immediately thinks that I know everything about raising corn, soybeans, wheat, cattle, swine. I do not. Like I mentioned, it's not always been my forte, but I knew that being in an uncomfortable situation and competing at whatever level would allow me to grow. And it goes the same with our Sigma Alpha chapter here at SIU. I entered SIU actually this past fall. I transferred from my local community college and I joined Sigma Alpha, which quite frankly, when I walked into the situation, there was 4 active members. That was it. Also, if you know me or my personality, or maybe you've gathered it already, being a part of a sorority is not something that anyone would guess. In fact, a lot of my friends and family laughed when I brought up the idea of even trying it. But it was all pushed with the idea of growth. The idea of I knew putting myself in this situation would be challenging, but I was set up for it because of my production ag background. And it also would force me to grow in other ways that even I didn't know I needed to grow in. So I'm really excited to now be serving as the president both this semester and until January, because this is an organization on our campus that has a very diverse perspective. Our pillars are scholarship, leadership, fellowship, and service. So definitely different than what you traditionally think of in a sorority, because we're a professional agricultural sorority. All of our members have some sort of interest in agriculture or around maintaining relationships in it, whether or not they are pursuing a career in the industry or outside of it. They bring a lot of value, a lot of diverse perspectives, which allow us all to improve ourselves and where we're coming from. And we have a network of people who collectively lift each other up and help each other grow, identifying opportunities for professional development as well as scholarship, leadership, and we get to serve our community in so many different aspects. So really, that's the majority of my background, why I'm pursuing a career in agriculture, and specifically agricultural communications. If you ask me where I want to go with it, I don't know. I like to joke that a year from now, I will be graduating, and I guess whoever will give me money, I will go work for. But I look forward to continue establishing that place, that role, because I am so indebted to the industry, the experiences I've had through 4-H and FFA, like Lexi mentioned. But I would just like to challenge each of you to kind of consider, where do you want to serve, whether it's currently or in the future, as well as what opportunities can you identify to grow in, whether that's professionally, academically. There's so many chances, and it just takes being uncomfortable and it takes embracing that. So I appreciate the chance to speak today, and I welcome any questions or comments that you have, so please feel free to throw those in the chat. It's just an honor to speak and an honor to be here. So with that, I will throw the virtual microphone over to Casey for her presentation.
Thanks, Taylor. I am really excited about this. So I feel like old, and I'm also trying to find the right angle here because the sun's shining in on me. So I apologize for the fidgeting. But you know, listening to Lexi and Taylor, that just like gives me chills, and I'm excited for you guys because I'm not like light years ahead of you, but I'm just like maybe 1 to 2 steps further than you. And so it's really cool to kind of reminisce and think, I was in your shoes not too long ago, and it just reminds me of how far not only agriculture has come, but how far I've come, and knowing my background and knowing the steps I had to take to get to where I am. At the time, they were kind of painful, but looking back, I had to go through them. And so I kind of want to just like tell my history and share a little bit about my background, just to kind of tie things together for you. And then I'll bring some light into what I'm doing today. And I hope that that kind of gives you some hope and encouragement. And I'm an open book as well. So if any of you have any questions, you can feel free to ask questions now or reach out to me afterwards. But I grew up on a corn and soybean farm as well. I lived right on the state line of Indiana and Illinois. So we battled the time change every single year. And we lived in a house in Illinois, but my parents had 2 different zip codes. So my mom was an Illinois resident and my dad was an Indiana resident. So that was really fun. But I technically went to school in Chrisman, Illinois, and I had a very small class. We graduated with 17 people. And at the time that didn't seem real small, but it didn't seem big either because I didn't know anything different. I have 3 sisters, and my mom and dad and us 4 girls all were very active on the farm. It wasn't anything that we knew anything different about. It was just expected of us to get up, go to school, come home, and either work ground or help with chores or split wood or whatever it is. It was just the way of life for us. And this point is important, and I'll explain it here in just a little bit. But I grew up, I went to school, I was the vice president of our FFA chapter, all I think 12 of us in the entire chapter. But I did run for president. And Lexi, when you were talking about that, it reminded me, like, I was voted for vice president because I was a female and I would have been good at the bookkeeping and keeping things on track. I wasn't supposed to be a president because that was supposed to be a man's job. And that kind of, like rubbed me a little bit during the time, but looking back, like it kind of ticks me off because I think I could have whipped those guys into shape. And, I didn't realize it was a thing back then when someone had said, oh, Casey, you'd be better at this vice president job because they're the ones who, do this, and this. And it was because I was a female that they did that. And that was, I graduated high school in 2008. And so that doesn't seem like that long ago. For me, it feels like a long time. But when you think about women in history, especially women in agriculture, you would think that men, or I guess society, would be treating those things a little bit differently. Like we're in like a new age, right? But it still happens today. And so when I graduated from high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I grew up on a farm. It's the only thing I ever knew. We had a very rural community, so I didn't know anything other than our farm town and our farm life. But I did have an aunt. So my dad's sister left the farm when she was ready for college, and she moved to Nashville, Tennessee. And I spent every summer down there that I was able to. I'd spend like 1 or 2 weeks down there every summer. And I just loved the bright city lights. And I thought, if I'm going to make something of myself, I got to get out of this town. I got to go out and I have to do something. And I don't see agriculture really paving that path for me to live this big glamorous life and live in this huge brick house and have these fun activities at the edge of your fingers, like they're just right there. And I was so excited about that. Well, and I didn't know what I wanted to do for college, but I knew I needed to go. That was something that was very encouraged when we were in high school. It was, you're going to college. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you go to the trade school. That was a big deal back then. You either went to welding school or you went to mechanical school or you went to college, right? You had to go do something. So I went to Lakeland College there in Mattoon, and I went for 2 years. And as I was trying to figure out, right before I left for college, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? My dad goes, well, if I'm going to pay you to go to college and you don't know what you want to do, how about you go for agriculture? And that way we can write it off and you can bring some knowledge back to our farm and all is well. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I went for agriculture business there at Lakeland. And honestly, I learned so much. I made so many good friends. I had a blast. It was very hands-on. And I thought, okay, this is cool. And then it was time for me to graduate with my associates. And I thought, well, what am I going to do now? Well, all of my friends were either transferring to U of I or they were going to Carbondale. And I thought, all right, I guess I'll go do that too. Well, Carbondale is a little bit more affordable. So went down to Carbondale and I did that. And Victoria Thomas was actually there while I was there as well. So we're showing our age there, huh? But I met my now husband, we dated there. We went to class together. And so I spent a lot of time on the back of his Harley riding around on the wine trails. And, you know, we had a good time. And so when I graduated from college, I left in 2012, and my husband didn't graduate for another semester. And so I said, well, I guess I'm not going to date a frat star long distance. So you need to, you know, I decided to move on. He was AGR. I did not join a sorority because, like Taylor, I transferred halfway through. And there was one real ag sorority down there, and I cannot for the life of me think of it. So you might know what it is, but I went to a couple of the orientations down there, and I just didn't feel like I fit in with any of those girls. I felt like they were into parties, they were into being the type of female that I wasn't. Alpha, Gamma, Delta, there you go. And, you know, it wasn't something that I was interested in. I didn't really like females, to be honest. It wasn't something that I wanted to spend a lot of my time with, let alone live with them. I had 3 sisters, and I was ready to not have to share a bedroom. And so I hung out with a lot of them, but I always joked, I said, I don't have to pay to have friends, and that didn't really make them happy, but it is what it is. And so I graduated, and looking back, I see the connections, I see the value of having those kinds of relationships and resources like a sorority. But like I said, at the time, it just didn't make sense for me, nor could I afford it. And so I'm sure that it's going to be valuable for you. It just wasn't something that I did. So I graduated, like I said, a semester ahead of my husband, and I ended things with him. And I said, see you later, I'm moving back home. So I moved back home to the farm, worked with my dad for about a month, and come June, it was time for us to spray. And so, like I said, he's a farmer. So I came back home to farm, and we were out in the fields, and he goes, you need to go to town and get some sprayer parts. So I go to our local John Deere dealership, and I said, you guys have got to give me a job. I cannot work for my dad any longer. And so that's when I became a parts girl at our local John Deere dealership. And that was an eye-opening experience for me, because like I said, I have never thought about being a woman in agriculture as a thing. It just was, right? It wasn't anything I ever gave thought to. But I knew that there, you know, grumpy old men still exist, men who have really nasty things to say about women in the workplace still exist. Even women still kind of stereotype you. And, you know, that was a difficult thing for me, because that was my very first job outside of internships, outside of, you know, my SAEs, you know, all those kinds of things. That was the only, like, that was like a real job. And so I remember one time, it was a few months into that job, someone came in and said, hey, I need a part for XYZ tractor. And I said, okay, what's the serial number break on that? Because on a 4020, there's a new serial number and an old serial number. And he at first was like, how do you know that there's a serial number? You know, it just kind of caught him off guard. And so I was working with that, and he goes, well, I'm gonna wait till so-and-so comes in and I'll get the part with him. And I'm like, this is my job. Like, I'd be more than happy to help you. And he told me that I belonged in the kitchen with a broom in my hand, barefoot and pregnant. And this was probably this was summer of 2012. That still happens, guys. And so I was like, wow, we're still doing that, huh? And so, you know, from then on, I mean, I was very upset about that, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to just keep my head down and do my thing. And, you know, 2 years goes by, and I was like, okay, I'm ready for a promotion. I've been doing this for a while. I'm ready for some more responsibility. And our dealership didn't have a position available for me specifically. And so at that point, I'm like, I'm determined. I've always had a drive. I've always been a go-getter. I'm also a middle child, and I'm a Taurus. So bring it on. I'm gonna do what I need to do. And so I was very determined. And at that time, the guy I was dating at Southern and I got back together. And so I was looking for some positions over in St. Louis area, because that's where he's from. And I found a job with corporate John Deere, and I applied for it and I got it. And the looks on my boss's face when I came back to them and said, you didn't have a job for me at this dealership, but I'm going to surpass you and I'm going to go straight to corporate. Oh, they about fell out of their chair. It was the best day of my life. So that's when working in the corporate world really kicked off for me. So I moved in 2015 to the middle of Missouri and didn't know anybody there. My husband was still in St. Louis. So I literally just hopped right over him, moved to the middle of Missouri, worked for corporate John Deere as a territory sales manager. And I learned a lot of lessons there as well, because not only is culture different over there, farming is different, and I didn't have any support system while I was there. So I started to look for different women in agriculture organizations, and I couldn't find any. And so I was kind of just out there doing life by myself. And one of my customers, so I worked, the dealerships were my customers. And one of the dealerships that I had was a Mennonite, it was in a Mennonite community. And my boss and I went to this place, just the two of us. We met up with the owner, and he wouldn't even acknowledge me. He wouldn't even look at me. I was non-existent during that meeting. And my boss was trying to say, this is your new contact. She will be managing your account. It wouldn't even look at me. And I know that there's a cultural barrier there from, you know, my culture and the Mennonite community. I totally understand that. But like I said, that was in 2015. That's just a few years ago. And this is still happening. And so not only did that affect my job performance, it affected my self-esteem, because am I not good enough for this? And then there was another account that they tried to do some things to me that are not okay. And I was cornered in a barn on my own with this man that was much larger than me. And I thought, there's got to be a support system. There's got to be somebody that I can talk to about this that understands it. Because not only am I trying to, you know, be a professional and show that I'm capable of doing this job, but going to my boss and telling them I don't feel comfortable visiting my customers, that makes you look weak. And that makes you look like you're not capable of doing your job. And so thankfully, my boss was able to, you know, we tackled the situation. But I mean, this was 5 years ago, you know, like this is still a really real thing. And so I am proud to see how far women in agriculture has come, but there are still things that women are not talking about. And that is the thing that I wanted to bring up, is that I'm 30 years old. I shouldn't have to carry a 9mm on my side to go visit a customer for my job. I shouldn't have to feel scared. I shouldn't have to feel like I can't talk about these things without sounding weak, or that my voice doesn't matter, or that I'm incapable of doing my job. And so I'm really proud to hear Lexi and Taylor's side of it, your success stories where you're making waves and you're being a leader in agriculture, but there is a dark corner of this that's still not being talked about. And so through those last couple of years of working for John Deere, and I had an opportunity to move back to Indiana with a farm management software company. I ran a couple of states over here. I worked with a lot of high-end growers that were not small farmers. So I was still kind of in that, I guess, not corporate, but not ground level or entry level. I was working with really executive professional farmers. I mean, they had LLCs, they were corporate farmers who had thousands and thousands and thousands of acres, and they had an entire staff. It wasn't just a one-man show. So I had to be very professional. And one of the battles that I had in doing that was, okay, well, what do I wear? You know, like you want to be professional and look clean cut when you're working with growers at that type of scale, but you also don't want to be too feminine, but you don't want to be too manly, because you know you want to be taken serious. And so things like that, it's like, here I am, you know, still having these questions of, well, I don't know what to wear to my job. And like I said, like it's really cool to see how far things have come, but there are still a lot of things that aren't being talked about. And we're still kind of like gun shy of, well, what do I bring up? What do I do here? Who can I talk to? I don't have a community. I don't have a sisterhood that understood that. And maybe that's where a sorority would have helped me out. I don't know if it would happen or not. But I didn't have that. And so I started looking around for other women in agriculture, you know, groups here in Indiana, and I did find one called Women in Agribusiness. And I do think that that is a really great organization to connect you with resources and other women, but the meetups always happened in Indianapolis. And that's about 2 hours from where I live. And it always happened during dinner. And so it's like, well, do I leave my job wherever I'm happen to be at, you know, because I've worked remotely for about 7 years. So I've never had an office. And so wherever I'm at, whatever farm I'm visiting, how far is that to this meetup? And I think it was about once a month. And so it just didn't make sense for me to go to those meetups because it would be from 5 to 7. And you know, we'd eat dinner there, but it's like, okay, do I spend the night in Indianapolis or do I drive 2 hours home and not get home till 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night? And then you're tired for the next day, you know, things like that. But honestly, I couldn't find any other community or resource that had other women in ag that got it, you know, like there were a lot of executive women there. And then there were some that were, you know, Lexi and Taylor's age that were college or, you know, just very entry level stuff. But there wasn't anybody like right in the middle of professional, executive, and entry level that I could connect with. And so I know that there are organizations out there such as Illinois Agri-Women, but what's that do for me here in Indiana? I would love to connect and figure that out. Maybe we need to start something up over here. And maybe there is a resource here and I just haven't found it. And if that's the case, well, what's that saying to the amount of advertising or outreach that they have? Because I'm on the hunt and I'm not finding it. So what I decided to do was just create my own. So I started this thing called the Corn Belt Cadence in November. And I don't think that there can ever be too many women in ag organizations or Facebook pages or groups or whatever, because there's a lot of us and every single one of us has a different background and a different story. And to me, I couldn't fit into just any one of those, right? So I am a farmer's daughter, I am a farmer's wife, and I am a professional in the ag industry, and I'm a mom, and I'm doing gardening. And so it's like I fit into all these different buckets, and I couldn't find a place that I could be in all of those buckets at the same time. And so a lot of those Facebook groups that I was finding were women in ag who were farmers' daughters, or women in ag who were the farmer. And there were a lot of women in ag groups who just got on there to gripe and complain. And I couldn't find any that I felt comfortable enough to be all of the buckets, all of the time, but focus on leadership and development and growth and have a positive and encouraging support system. That's what I was after. And like I said, it just didn't feel like I found that. And there, like I said, it might be out there. I just haven't found it. So I went ahead and just created my own. And we have about 230 some members now in the Facebook group. In 2000, I guess it was the end of 2019, I joined Leadership Vermilion County, which is through Purdue Extension. And the only reason I even got hooked up with this is because of my neighbor. And she is the county extension coordinator for 4-H. And she goes, I think you should take this leadership class. And I thought, I don't need to take a leadership class. I'm a leader already. Like, look at me go. I'm doing all these things. I'm gung-ho. I'm outgoing. I love to connect. I check all the leadership boxes. I don't need to do that. And she goes, well, just take it anyway. I think it'd be eye-opening for you. And it was. Turns out I wasn't a leader. I wasn't someone who knew what the heck they were doing. I was like a little chihuahua, just constantly barking and thinking that that was making a wave, and it wasn't. It was just really annoying. And so in that leadership class, I learned that sometimes the best leaders are those that shut their mouths and sit back and observe and watch and reflect and encourage other people to be leaders and are okay with not taking the credit. Not always, but sometimes that's what leadership is about. And that was the piece that I was missing. And like I said, I didn't know it until I took that class. And so again, as I was on this hunt to find this community of women in agriculture that got that, and that wasn't there just to complain or vent or what's the best recipe for field meals? You know, I want something more in depth and past surface level. I needed something a lot deeper than that. And so I created this mentorship program through the Corn Belt Cadence. And today we have 12 mentors and about 5 mentees. And that's the complete opposite of what I even thought was going to happen. I thought I was going to have more people wanting to learn than that was willing to take the time to share knowledge. And it's been the complete opposite. And so that is just my part-time, like on the side. I don't make any money from that. That's just hobby. That's just something I enjoy. And on top of all of that, my full-time job, I work for a company called Indigo Ag now, and I'm learning about different regenerative and sustainable ag practices and what the heck carbon farming means and what microbials are. And I mean, as you can tell from my background, I don't have an agronomy background at all. And so I feel like I'm back in college. I wish I would have taken some more notes or sat closer to Victoria and paid attention, because now it's like, you need to know these kinds of things. And so I'm learning right now as well, even though I've been out of college for several years, I'm still looking for resources. I'm still looking for contacts. I'm still trying to network with people that can steer me in the right direction. And so I do value community, and I do value knowing, okay, if I don't know the answer, who knows? And if they don't know the answer, what resources are out there? And so on the Corn Belt Cadence website, not only do I have the mentorship listed, but I am also trying to add on different relationships and resources listed too, because I could take a Google search, and if you say women in ag groups, you know, like there might be a handful that pop up, but think how many are slipping through the cracks. Same thing with resources and relationships. You know, you can go on LinkedIn and you can search for people all day long, but you know, how do you kickstart that relationship? How do you cultivate those relationships? And so that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm just trying to take my Rolodex and all of my notebooks and put them into one spot so people like you guys can find them very easily and not have to go on this crazy witch hunt like I had to. So I know that was a lot. I took up way more time than I needed to, but I get really excited about it and I'm passionate about it. And I think that a lot of you guys can probably relate. And so if there's something that I can do to steer you in the right direction or give you encouragement in knowing that you're not alone and you're unique and you're different, and let's embrace that, I want to be that cheerleader for you. So anyway, I'm Casey Boyle. I am stepping down now. I'm going to turn it over. I think it was Karla. So thank you guys for listening.
I'm so impressed with everyone's stories. This has been amazing to listen to you all. And, you know, Casey, I've also struggled finding workwear for women. Apparently there's a gap. You know, nobody makes good work boots. But yeah, you know, I'm so honored to be here just to share a little bit about, you know, me generally, kind of how I got here and what I'm trying to do now, you know, what the work of my lab is all about. So, you know, I think I like Taylor, you know, I kind of struggled to find my place in agriculture for a while. And, you know, I think I finally found it, you know, but I wasn't raised on a farm. My grandparents had farms. My dad's family had a dairy farm, and my mom's family managed row crops, cotton in particular. And my mom's backstory is, you know, she would get out of school to pick cotton every year. And she, you know, her back would be breaking, her fingers would be raw, and she would stand up in the cotton field and yell out, "I am not marrying a farmer." So she didn't marry a farmer. I was raised in a rural town, not on a farm, but I always visited my grandparents, and I was always just sort of drawn to that type of agricultural environment. So now my sister's family, my only other sibling, they raise livestock, and I find myself in row crops now. So we kind of come full circle. But you know, I'm here because there were a couple of professors that sort of took me under their wing as an undergraduate student, you know, based on academic performance. I was approached one day and asked if I wanted to do research in their labs. So, you know, someone took a chance on me as a young female who was interested in science, and that really made all the difference. And that project was amazing. I canoed to work every day to take samples of vegetation along the Ghost River in Moscow, Tennessee, and the Stokes Creek in Dyersburg. And, you know, I waded through water, you know, waist high, and you know, got to watch the snakes swim by me, you know, but I love that experience so much. I loved being in research. I learned how to identify over 100 plants And that's really how I began to know for sure that I wanted to go into plant biology. And since then, I've developed that more into vegetation control. I studied invasives for a while, and now I'm purely in agricultural weed control. I study agricultural weeds. So that's kind of my story. I want to share a couple of slides with you all now. As an instructor, I'm used to having visual aids, so it's hard for me to get away from that. But, I was asked by Susan to kind of talk about the work that we're doing in hemp. So I just want to share more the purpose, why I decided to pursue that type of research with you. But one of the greatest honors that I've had, so I was recently featured with this panel of other amazing women scientists. So my professional society at the national level is the Weed Science Society of America. And just 2 years ago, WSSA elected the first woman president of the organization. So that was a huge accomplishment. It was, a huge milestone. And every year, for several years, there have been networking events that are especially for women in the society. There are generally 400 to 600 scientists that attend our annual meetings every year. And, I got to be on a panel with these amazing people. And I got to address questions like, how do you handle work-life balance? I have kids, I have twins that just turned 11. And, I balance everything that I do in my career with the needs of my family life. So we talked about that. We talked about how to continue to create opportunities for diversity in our field. How do we recruit more women? How do we recruit more minorities? So those were the types of topics that we covered. And I'm very honored to have 3 out of my 5 current grad students. They are women in the field of weed science now. And it's funny, I'm not recruiting women, but I think just seeing a woman in science, that tends to attract more young females that want to get into the field. So I'm also very honored to have those individuals in my lab. So a little bit about what I'm trying to do. My lab, we study herbicide resistant weeds. We study chemical control efficacy in agricultural systems. And that's been a priority since I came into my position in 2015. But my background is actually in ecology. I have a more general understanding of plants and plant biology and plant ecology. So I've tried to take that chemical control and sort of transition that into other types of integrated control. So what other types of control, what other types of pressures can you add on top of those weeds to control them that's not going to lead to the evolution of herbicide resistance? So I'm sure you're all aware we have a horrible problem with herbicide resistance all across Illinois. Our weeds are evolving herbicide resistance about as fast as we can come up with, new herbicides, or faster, really. So here you can see the global increase in the unique resistant cases. So we're putting a lot of pressure on our herbicides, but we can add in these other practices. And SIU is now part of this organization called GROW, and you can see the link there to that website. So this is all about integrated weed management. So what other tactics can you add in? And we're looking at mechanical tactics like harvest weed seed control, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Chemical tactics, that's still the basis of a lot of our management programs. We don't have a lot of biological options in the Midwest, but the cultural tactics are the things that I think we can really improve. So my lab is looking at diversified rotations, and that's where I hope that hemp can come into the scene. Things like narrow crop rows. We're doing a lot of work with cover crops and also interseeded crops. So interseeding is kind of novel. It's something that I don't really see a lot of acceptance for. At least it's going to be a while before we reach wide-scale grower acceptance. But we know that water hemp is resistant to 7 herbicide sites of action in Illinois. So we have this historical work from SIU. Dr. George Kapusta was the original weed scientist at SIU. And he had a graduate student that looked at grass interference in soybeans. So he actually used giant foxtail, which is another weed that we wouldn't want to use because it itself has herbicide resistance that exists So we don't want to use giant foxtail. My PhD student, Madison Decker, is looking at interseeding winter wheat into soybean. And she's looking at different seeding timings, different termination timings. But basically, we're trying to create something that's going to cover the soil and prevent seed germination. So how can we add to the activity of our herbicides and create another pressure to hold the weeds back? So her questions are, some of them are, when does the winter wheat need to be planted to get the greatest common water hemp suppression? When does it need to be terminated to avoid soybean yield loss? And can she enhance the control of water hemp by using residual herbicides over the top of the wheat? So we're really excited to see where this research is going. We're putting this into a proposal that's going into the United Soybean Board. And there were 7 other states, other weed scientists in other states, that immediately wanted to jump into the proposal and do this proof of concept across a wide region. So that's really exciting to see this, this historical SIU project further developed now across a greater geography. But specifically about hemp, if we can diversify our crop rotations, we're gonna have better success at controlling weeds, suppressing pathogens, all of those things. So right now we know we have a very simplified rotation, just looking at corn and soybean rotations. But you can see the hemp crop here. There are very few weeds that would germinate and survive under such a dense stand like that. So we want to see if we can add hemp into rotations. Can we continually crop hemp? Is there an environmental toll that would take? Because if we can continually crop hemp for about 3 years, we pass the peak seed viability for common water hemp. So there's potentially some chance to remediate farmlands if we can successfully put hemp into our rotations. So we have 3 different commodity types. So we know that was a fiber commodity type that I showed you. Dual purpose commodity types are grown for both fiber and seed. And then the CBD type cannabis, that's the type that everyone's familiar with. So when we first gained the opportunity to work with this crop in Illinois, everyone wanted to grow CBD. I think, looking at the market right now and kind of how there was a bubble, and right now, people are having a hard time selling their floral biomass. I think the future will probably be in fiber and in dual purpose once those markets fully develop. But right now, there's really nowhere to sell your fiber that you produce, or there's not a lot of places to sell in the seed that you would produce. But the row crop production, that would be the first 2 here. The CBD type cannabis is really specialty crop production. So that's a completely different cropping system. But because everybody else was starting with CBD type hemp, my lab did too. It was actually the easiest thing for us to start with that year in 2019. So this was this is my master's student, Avery Shikanai, who's done all of this work. You can see the plasticulture systems that we put our CBD hemp in. And we have here, you see a picture of a water hemp plant competing with that hemp in the plasticulture system. So Avery actually looked at the competition, the competitive ability of hemp. And in some cases, hemp can be incredibly competitive. So even with up to 5 plants, 5 common water hemp plants per planting hole, he did not see a significant difference in the amount of biomass, floral biomass, that the hemp plants produced. So 5 plants, 5 water hemp plants would be pretty competitive in this scenario. So hemp is more competitive in some situations than some of our most competitive weeds. So that was good news. And then he looked at the water hemp biomass when hemp was present, which you see on the right, and when hemp was absent, which you see on the left. And when hemp is present, the water hemp plants do not do very well. They don't grow, they don't produce as much biomass themselves. So that's also very good news. And we think that hemp is producing a lot of phytochemicals. It's putting a lot of chemistry back into the soil that's probably helping suppress those other plants around it. He's looked at the phytotoxicity of hemp residue. And we hope that in the future, there may be the potential to use this property of hemp to help further remediate agricultural lands. On the left, you see a picture of a harvester with a chaff lining chute. So you may not have heard of chaff lining. This is a practice that is growing pretty dramatically in adoption in Australia. And in December, I had the opportunity to tour Australia for about 2 weeks with other weed scientists, and we visited a lot of different farmers. We saw 6 different types of harvest weed seed control practices, and chaff lining is one of those practices. It's the cheapest and the easiest to implement. But you see all the fine biomass, the fine particles of the crop, and all the weed seeds are what comes out in this chaff chute. So you're creating a line of this fine biomass along with the weed seeds. So you know where your weed seeds are. The next season, as the seeds germinate, you could possibly go in with a banded application of a non-selective herbicide. So you could use something that would normally kill the crop because you're only applying it to that band of weed seeds. So if you do that over time, you know, your weed seeds are going to be concentrated in this line. And there's great research going on in Australia right now to show that this is actually effective on their herbicide-resistant weeds. So we also have funding from the United Soybean Board to look at chaff lining in soybeans. So that's something else that I'm really excited about. But if we think about chaff lining in a hemp crop, we know that that residue is already phytotoxic. It contains chemicals that are going to suppress the weeds. So can we chaff line a hemp crop, put all the weed seeds in this chaff from hemp, and then reduce seed germination? And Avery's project has also shown, you see here the diagram on the right, you know, we used bare soil, and we see a pretty high amount of seed germination in the bare soil. He's looked at corn residue as our control treatment, and you can see there that there's still some germination in the corn. But if you compare what's happening there to the hemp, you can really see the suppressive ability of the hemp residue there. So it's possible that, you know, maybe we could come up with a novel system using hemp in rotation with corn and soybeans to help further suppress weeds. But there's just, we don't know. There are so many more questions than answers right now. You know, we're still learning how to grow a hemp crop. So that's been a pretty steep learning curve, but it's been a lot of fun to learn about a new crop. But we don't really have any herbicides available right now. We may soon have sonolin, which is ethylfluoralin. That would be a pre-emergence option that would maybe hold back the water hemp and some of the grasses. And then we have Assure 2 that may be labeled. It's currently labeled in Canada, but that's quizalofop, which is a grass-specific herbicide. So maybe you could get some post-emergence control on the grasses in that crop. But that's not really a lot of options. And one of our industry collaborators was telling me they're going to have to go back into production with sonolin because there's not even enough of that produced right now. It's not widely available. It's an older chemistry. But some of the research that we're doing as well, we're looking at the critical weed-free period. We just put in a proposal to study that with Cornell University as the lead. And we're trying to determine what that early phase is of the crop cycle. So how long can weeds compete with that seedling before there's a yield loss in the crop? So there are all kinds of great questions. Yeah, and I'm just excited to be here. You know, I've experienced maybe some of the things that Casey had referenced. You know, being in a group of all men. You know, talking about research. You know, it can be difficult to make your voice heard sometimes. But yeah, I mean, being persistent and being confident in what you know and what you want to do, I think that goes a long way. Yeah, I know there were some questions for other presenters. So,
Karla, I can go ahead and take the first one, and then if Taylor wants to add on, because I know Mr. Webb had addressed that to Taylor and I can go ahead and start. In case we didn't see it in the chat, Mr. Webb asks, my question for the both of you, what are gaps with diversity, equity, and inclusion in food and agriculture you would identify that you see yourselves becoming active to create and enhance positive change? And I'm going to start off by saying that the presentations by Casey and Karla both addressed issues between being a woman in agriculture. And in the FFA Creed, there's a line that says, achievements won by the present and past generations of agriculturalists. And because I have this experience that I can serve as the Illinois FFA state president, and that 51% of all ag teachers in Illinois are female, I can say that I am in the position I am in because of the work that women before me have put in. And I'm very, very proud to hear both of your stories and be able to sit on the other side and say, I experienced the hard work that both of you put in. So thank you for that. And as well as Taylor, especially serving on the first all-female team. I know when we first got into office, we were told, hey, this is what the other girls team did, so just be aware of these questions. So, and they had put together a little bit of a kind of a presentation document to say, hey, if you get this question, this is how you answer it, and that was extremely helpful. But Mr. Webb, back to your question, some of the problems that I am extremely passionate about, and I know I share that with some of my teammates as well. I know Margaret, Molly, and Emma are all on today, and some of those problems are, one of that I am extremely passionate about is the diversity between urban agriculturalists and rural agriculturalists. And part of that is there's so much rural agriculture that everyone is so familiar with. You know, you come from a farm, and I know a lot of us have talked about production. You know, we grew up on farms. And then Miss Gage said, I didn't. And one of the things that I am extremely passionate about is growing agriculture in an urban setting. And in FFA, we work with a lot of urban FFA chapters who are overcoming the odds and using the vacant space that they have to make gardens. Maybe it's a raised bed, that way they can farm more, or maybe they're doing aquaponics, or maybe they're growing food inside so that they can use that room and still produce healthy food that they can use in a city. And I think that's one that I'm extremely passionate about. And another one is, I don't know how, but I failed to mention that I'll be attending SIU in the fall to study agricultural education. So that's kind of why I'm here, really is the main reason. Sorry, I forgot that. But I am, as someone who's going into agricultural education in hopes of becoming an agriculture teacher, I think one of the main ones is educating the public and youth and maybe consumers about what the producers are doing. And that's extremely important, because if they don't understand where their food comes from, or if there's questions that are brought up, I want to be able to answer those questions, and I want to be able to teach my future students, this is the way that it goes. And with Ms. Gage talking about hemp, I am unfamiliar, and I am looking forward to getting more familiar, because I want to support all of agriculture and understand all of agriculture. That way I can be a voice to the different consumers who maybe have questions. So Mr. Webb, that was a great question, and I'll allow Taylor to go ahead and do her answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of great things and points that I had also considered and thought of in my in my kind of spiel. I talked, coming from a production background, I think at times people get stuck in the stigma of, I was raised in production and that's where I am expected to go in the industry. And I kind of allotted to it, but that's not quite all of the opportunities that's out there. And it's, in some cases, it's not even feasible for a family, for all of those individuals to come back. So I think that's a part where we can continue growing and just sharing that knowledge about the career opportunities and how valuable having production agriculture background, an agriculture background or experience is, but how that's not everything, and that doesn't mean that that's where you have to go back to. I also really liked the point of, diversity. We're looking at continue to grow the agriculture industry in so many different areas. And personally, as an agricultural communicator, I want to bridge that gap, like you've also mentioned, between producers and consumers, and have that opportunity to communicate and answer those questions that they want answered and they want to know about. And I think even as an agriculture industry as a whole, we can take that to another level, and we can make sure that as an industry, we're being inclusive and we're taking those kind of knowledge and skills, whether what area you're from, what part of the nation, urban or rural, and making sure that we show a united front, especially when we start talking about the consumer side of things. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I'm sure it will continue to have, but to just have diverse conversation amongst urban and rural, traditional and non-traditional, because I think ultimately that will be extremely valuable as we move forward in this new consumer-driven information kind of they want. So it's kind of what I'll tie in, but Lexi did a wonderful job. So thanks so much, Mr. Webb. I think there was another question from Shigley about Sigma Alpha specifically and how we grow, or we've grown. I will apologize, I forgot to mention that part. So I came in this fall as a member candidate is what they call it. So there was 4 active members, and then there was 4 member candidates, which is really atypical. And then come January, our team was elected, and all of a sudden it was just the 4 of us. So none of us have any sorority experience. All of us are pretty unfamiliar with it to begin with and very much out of our comfort zones. But we took that as an opportunity to find opportunities for growth and community service. We've been able to do a lot of really cool things, whether that's parliamentary procedure, kind of class, or service projects. And now we are successfully at 18 members, or there's a class of 14 member candidates, so they'll be activated here in like 4 or 5 weeks. So it's really exciting. And I think that touches on the idea of diversity in kind of perspectives. There's some of us that have ag backgrounds, there's some that don't. One of them is actually in kind of wants to be, I think, a dietitian. So that's an interesting kind of perspective to have. Not to mention somebody is doing communication disorders as their major. So hopefully our group of people will kind of continue growing in our perspectives and continue building the chapter kind of from the ground up. But we're excited, and hopefully we can even get Lexi here next fall, but we'll see. I think there was a question for Casey next from Mr. Webb.
Yeah, so quite a few about the carbon side and the sustainability regenerative practices. So where that started for me, just to kind of back up a little bit. So back in 2019, I was working with several growers throughout the Corn Belt, and a lot of them were looking for ways to diversify their farm. Well, that was kind of a new concept for me because our farm is very conventional. We've done tillage. We're not afraid to go in and rip it up. And we've obviously changed over the last several years, but that's, generationally, that's what we've done because that's what American farmers did, right? That's all we knew. Other than a select few that knew that tillage was damaging the soil. And I didn't have my eyes opened up to that until about 2019. So some of those growers that I was working with that wanted to diversify their farm, we're starting to implement hemp into their operation. And so I'm so excited to hear you talk about hemp because that's something that's all I really focused on in 2019. And I spent a lot of time in Kentucky and Southern Indiana working with growers, figuring out, okay, how do we implement this crop? Do we implement it for fiber, for CBD, for both, for all 3 different ways? I mean, I have a lot of growers who did tri-crops and trying to retrofit their machinery to make it work. And now they're building specific pieces of machinery. And so every aspect of my background kind of like intertwines. And so I think that's really important, Taylor, for you to think about too, is because you have that passion for art, obviously, or else you wouldn't have thought about going. I think that's what you said was art, but there's a way to tie all of that together too. And I think being open-minded, not only just as a person, but in our agriculture industry is really important too. And the reason I bring that up is because, when I majored in agriculture business economics, that doesn't mean I need to be something that's ag business. I mean, I have a passion for marketing. I love networking. Brainstorming is like my favorite hobby, but I also have a real passion and a sweet spot for farmers. And so I try to find ways, and if someone were to ask me what I would be doing if I wasn't working in ag, I would tell them I'd be on Broadway. So, I mean, there's a lot of things like you have these passions, and so find a way to intertwine those. And I think in agriculture, if there are growers who are considering having a practice change, or at least saying, you know what, I don't know enough about this one area, being open-minded and saying, you know what, I'm not saying that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm saying I want to try this out and see if it works for my farm. And so just 2 kind of angles to think about diversity there. So as far as like the regenerative practices, I think Greg mentioned something about carbon. I do see a lot of growers at least considering bringing in sustainable practices and regenerative practices. And so what I mean by that is they're looking at, do I need to reduce my tillage on these types of soils? Do I need to look at a different crop rotation? Maybe I just need to leave the plant in the ground 2 more weeks. You know, maybe I need to look at reducing my nitrogen by 5%. I mean, just tweaks. And so you don't have to go from 0 to 60 or from 60 to 0. You can transition. There is a way to think about it. Try different things that work on your farm, what work for you and your operation and your personnel. Where else was I going with that? I was an auctioneer in a past life, so I talk fast, so I apologize about that. But as far as, I think somebody else said something about what are some things that you see our industry moving toward as far as sustainability is concerned. So when I came to Indigo, I knew nothing about anything as far as, like I said, agronomy. I was in sales, I worked with equipment, I worked with farmers, but I'm not an agronomist and I never aspire to be one. That's not something I'm passionate about. And so I am learning a lot, but the biggest thing that Indigo has taught me is to be open-minded. And so do I 100% agree with some of the programs that are out there, not just from Indigo, but as far as like a carbon program, you know, a lot of growers view it as snake oil. They're like, I don't understand it. I don't understand all the aspects or the benefits. Is it just a way to get my data? You have to really do your research there. And so I'll just be very unbiased in that sense, is if you're interested in those programs, you need to read through the contracts. You need to see if it's going to work for your farm. I don't want to dive too much further into that because I'm not here to promote or not promote a company. I'm here to just say, do your research and see what works best for you, because not every farm is cookie cutter. Not every farm is going to have the same type of equipment, the same type of soil, the same type of history, or, you know, all these different things are going to be different. So you really need to figure out what's going to work best for your farm. And if incorporating different practices or different crops or trying different things is what's going to work for you, you need to try that out. But my only key takeaway there is write it down and keep a journal or some kind of record to see your growth, what worked, what didn't. Let's compare those things. And so I do see our industry and farmers in general moving towards practices that are sustainable, especially with the new administration. I foresee some changes happening. What that looks like exactly, I don't know. But I would be more than happy to chat with either of you guys off the record specifically about Indigo and what that might look like for your specific farm. But just to kind of not detour from your questions, but just say, yeah, I do think that our industry is getting a lot smarter, and some of the research that's coming out, it has opened my eyes. And I didn't really have my eyes open until the last year or so. So if I'm someone that's constantly looking to grow, constantly looking to develop, and I'm just now getting my eyes opened, I imagine that our farmers are probably going to be a little bit further behind that, because some of them are very stuck in their ways, and this is what's comfortable, and maybe they're afraid that it's going to cost them money to make a change, and that's something that scares them, and they're not sure what the outcome is going to be, so they might be hesitant. But that's where agronomists come in. Those where ag consultants come in. There are people there to help you, and research does help. But like I said, you need to figure out what's going to work best for your operation, and just know that it might not be the same as somebody else's. So I know that didn't really answer the question, but I got off on a tangent. I guess I should read the question again.
There are a couple of questions about hemp specifically, so thanks, Emma and Greg. You know, as far as the reluctance to put hemp in a rotation, there are just so many unknowns right now. So you know, in some cases, it's just, there are too many things that could negatively influence that hemp crop. You know, one of them is any late season residual herbicide applications in corn or soybeans. We don't know what the proper rotation sequence is. You know, what's going to be the best sequence of crops to minimize the potential of pathogens, and, you know, so we don't know the sensitivities of the hemp crop fully yet. Also the markets, you know, that's probably the biggest reason, right? You know, if you can't grow something and sell it, you know, there are a lot of people that are starting small and trying to, you know, see what the capabilities are. So they'll start with an acre of hemp and see what the challenges are, and then, you know, look to scale up from there. But the hemp market right now, you know, there's really no place for us in Illinois to sell our fiber in the southern part of the state. We had, in Kentucky, we had Sunstrand Industries that has now gone out of business. we just, you know, there are a lot of potentials. You know, I know that there are people that are looking at bioplastics and trying to build that market, actively seeking partnerships in bioplastics with the purpose of cultivating hemp crops to go into production of those. But that just doesn't exist right now. And you also have to have a certain amount of biomass per acre. You know, farmers are typically going to shoot for 7 tons of biomass per acre. And right now in our research, we're nowhere near that. So we still have a lot to do as far as learning the basic agronomy of the crop. One thing that we know we're doing wrong is that we're not planting early enough. And that's tough for Illinois growers because right now, you know, we need to be planting our hemp crop in another month, you know, and it's probably still going to be raining. It's going to be difficult to get into the fields. So, you know, that's a challenge in itself, but we have to plant early to beat the weed emergence. But we still have some species that are going to give us challenges no matter when we plant. So as far as a seed market, you know, from our trials that we've done with a large-scale USDA project, we're working with the University of Kentucky on those and looking at hemp varieties at our Belleville Research Center. We saw a lot of gray mold, a lot of botrytis on our seed heads. And, you know, we have to find the right cultivars so that, you know, we have something that's going to tolerate the high level of humidity that we have in Southern Illinois. So right now, I think that it would be difficult to make a recommendation to a grower as to what rotation or how to integrate hemp into a rotational strategy. But that's all information that, you know, there are so many people that are working on this now. And I think we're going to see that information come. But right now, we just don't have it. So I would love to see SIU become a leader in the hemp industry. And as a matter of fact, we are in the process of hiring a cannabis biologist. So we are hiring a person to come in and specifically study hemp and focus on hemp. So that's pretty exciting too.
I don't see that we have any other questions. Do you see, Dr. Karla, Dr. Gage? I just really wanted to thank everybody because there's some amazing women at SIUC, and I'm really glad that we got to share this, and I'll be able to put this video on our Illinois Agri-Women website. So if you know anybody that would like to know more or talk to, you know, our presenters here, that way we can share it. In part of, you know, being in Illinois Agri-Women, you know, it's to do this, to bring women together, to learn, to share, to connect. And so I really appreciate you guys doing this. You know, we would love to, my purpose as a Southern Regional Director is to, you know, help this community learn about each other. Illinois Agri-Women, our focuses are to learn, grow, and impact. And if anyone would like to become a member or learn more about Illinois Agri-Women, you could go to our website, which is www.illinoisagriwomen.org, and we have a membership page. But one of the things I wanted to share with you guys is part of our Illinois Agri-Women is Women Changing the Face of Ag. And every year we have a convention for young women to learn about careers in agriculture. And with COVID, we were not able to do that this year. But we did do an online curriculum. And so, Dr. Gage, if you have any free time, I would like to do a video on your career. I think it would be very, very interesting. We can add videos onto our curriculum if you'd be interested. I did send Susan some information if there's any women professors that would like to talk about research, because I think that's kind of an area too that we don't always necessarily let women think that they could do, is, you know, be professors and continue research and educate at a higher level. So I would love to see that be added to our online curriculum. But if you haven't seen that, that is on our Women Changing the Face of Ag. And we also have scholarships for you young ladies. If you don't know about, especially there's a Ag Ed one that you can apply for your senior year. We also do scholarships for college, so please check out our website. If we don't have any other, do we have any other questions? If not, I'd like to thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us today. It was very enjoyable.
Could I just say
Sure.
what a wonderful opportunity it was for us to host this. I want to thank everybody who participated. You know, all of you young women who shared your stories. This was great. You know, and what a great opportunity to do it during Women's History Month. And so again, thank you. And you know, keep doing what you're doing. Persevere. Yeah, you're going to make a big difference. You're already making a big difference. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Fantastic
guys.
session.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming, and hopefully we can continue this and do another one in the fall. So.